Compelling stories are not hard to find. You just need to know where to look. Join your host, Dr. Eric Shaw, prosecutor Ryan Frank, writer Adrian Bonenberger, and comedian Ryan Connor as they interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. This is Baggage.
You are listening to Baggage, the podcast where we talk about bad things. I am Ryan Connor. I'm going to sort of drive the bus today. Co-host Ryan Frank. You
hey
say
guys.
Hello, Ryan.
Hey guys, how's it going? This is Ryan.
And Eric Shaw.
Howdy.
All right. Today we have, in the past, we've had people in war zones and, journalists in war zones and people creating COVID tests and all these things that are rough. And Ryan said, well, for December, let's go a little lighter. Let's have a comic on. And I was like, well, how about a comic who had the craziest thing, awful thing in history to happen to a comic on stage? And he's like, well, okay, then that sounds good too. So it actually fits the theme of the show instead of just being a comic talking about, fart jokes or whatever. So I want to introduce to you a good friend of mine. We've known each other for nearly 20 years. If you're in the DC area, you might know him as the co-host of the Good Morning Show on WPGC 95.5. He and I did Last Comic Standing together, and hanging out in that green room those days was so fun. And he's a Baltimore native, but DC Comics claim him as our own. Please welcome to the show, Jason Weems.
Yeah. What's up, y'all?
Thanks for coming.
Jason,
Hey,
good to have you on, man.
Thank you for
now
having
you
me.
came up with Ryan in the DC area. I must have seen you in you probably did the improv and stuff around the same time, Ryan. Yeah, I mean before Last Comic Standing, you guys knew each other, right?
Well,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I want to say 2004 or 5, something 5 or 6 maybe.
6. I started September 27th of 06.
Okay, so probably within a few weeks of then.
Yep.
Is that I remember. I'll just say, Jason. There's only been a few people since I've started, and it's Jason and John Muma and Rory Scovel who, when I first saw them, I started this same time as Rory and John too, but just the first time you see him, you're like, oh man, I could watch this for an hour already. On top of skill, there's an innate ability, and Jason is one of those select few I've seen with it. And so before you started, were you always a comedy fan, or was it something you always wanted to do?
I was always a fan of funny, no matter how that came about. I was a fan of laughing. I was a fan of that feeling that you got when, something made you lose control of your body because it was so funny. But it wasn't until high school that I even really understood that being a stand-up comedian was like a real actual thing. It felt so far-fetched, and it didn't seem like an actual career path. I was used to being just kind of funny around my friends and my brother. But even with that, I was extremely shy growing up. So
same here, man.
Yeah.
Super quiet. Were you the younger brother?
I'm the younger brother. Yep. So my older brother,
always
2 years my senior. And I was really sick growing up. So I had severe asthma growing up my entire life. I was a premature baby. I was supposed to be born in March, and I popped out in December. So, had crazy undeveloped lungs. I was partially baked.
So what Jason just did is called foreshadowing to all the people misusing the word foreshadowing on social media these days. That is what actual foreshadowing is. So, okay, you're doing stand up from September of 2006, and with a lot of success, and also stayed in Baltimore. I mean, I know you used to come up to New York for shows a lot, but it's always really impressive when people like build something out of a city other than New York and LA, because it's a much steeper climb. And then if I can just jump to, is it all right to just jump
whatever,
to the thing?
However y'all want to do it.
The inciting event.
And we're not even messing around. We're just getting in there.
So it was
January 6th, 2021.
Broken the Nancy Pelosi's office.
Jason texts me, you got to come in here and put your nuts on the desk.
It's going down.
No one's ever heard the other side of the story
until now.
Sorry.
No worries.
And we'll blur your face so no one knows that you were the guy
scramble
with the nut prints all over.
It sounds about right. Yeah,
Pelosi's
protect my
chair.
children. Thank you.
So let's see. Was it 2019 that everything happened?
It was 2017.
It was that long ago.
It was May 3rd, 2017.
So 2017 in May, and going back a few months before this, I remember you had Lyme disease.
Yeah.
Or Lyme's disease. Is it plural, possessive? How does that work?
I have it, and I still never know. I still never know if I need to put the S on it or not. I think it depends on how much pain my body is in on any given day. If I'm really in a lot of pain, I put the S on it.
Well, Eric, what's the medical opinion? You Googling it?
I am Googling it.
Thank you, Eric.
I believe it's singular, Lyme disease.
Got you.
All right.
Yeah.
So I accidentally said it correctly. I definitely thought it was there was an S there. So I remember you had Lyme disease and you had a catheter, right? So that's in my head on this night in 17, right?
2017, yeah. So the Lyme disease thing actually predates all of this. Like that goes back to like 2009 is when I first got.
Wow.
So
that's when you first.
Those
had
things
it.
are completely unrelated.
I mean, once you have it, right? I mean,
yes and no. It's a rare person that gets like the chronic form of it.
Yeah, I've got chronic.
Usually it's just like, usually it's kind of a short burst of like you feel like shit, really bad, like body aches, muscle aches, fevers, and you usually get antibiotics and you feel better. Mm-hmm. But there are a very small, unfortunate subset that get like chronic symptoms that just don't go away, and we don't really know why.
Yeah, and they just
you say some shit in every episode, Eric. I mean, like that was like the comic episode. What is Eric going to do? And here we are anyway. God damn.
I throw my expertise around.
Turns out you need medical advice on everything. So
I'm good
at
at parties.
Get this call. I'm at my apartment by myself, and it's kind of late. I get a call from a Philly comic. I cannot remember who it was because it was someone. It was like a friend of a friend. They called and they said, "Hey, Ryan, you know Jason Weems, right?" And I said, "Yeah, who is this?" And they said, "Well, we were talking, I know he's DC and they're mutual friends, and my name had come up, and they were like, we need to get in touch with his family. He has collapsed on stage, and at the time an ambulance had taken you to the hospital, and I can't remember if I got in touch with your wife or or if I called our friend Aaron Jackson and Aaron called her, but it was this just swirl of what is going on. Is he okay? They asked about medical conditions. I remembered the Lyme disease. So that's why I mentioned, I was like, I don't know if I was like, that's the only thing I can think of, because now thinking back, I think I can see you hitting an inhaler in the back of the room. And then it was just, that night for, me and Aaron, and I'm trying to think of who else knew that night what was going on. It was what you'd expect. And then obviously great news came through in the morning.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us through what you experienced there in Philly?
So I've been severely asthmatic my entire life. As I mentioned before, born, almost 3 months premature, came out, was in the NICU for quite some time, dealt with, severe asthma. So asthma attacks have always been a thing that I've been very familiar with my entire life. So, through middle school, high school, sometime around college, it seemed like it tapered off a little bit. and I wasn't getting attacks as frequently, definitely not as aggressive. But then somewhere in my early 30s, started having crazy attacks again. And at this point now we're, within this window of when this happened. So, what's crazy is, the incident that we're talking about, 2017, that was May 3rd, 2017. The person whose show I was doing in Philly that night, comic named Michelle Balloon, I met her in LA in a couple months prior to that, September of 2016. I was out there pitching a pilot that I had wrote, was doing like a week of shows. And what's crazy is I had another crazy attack then, that same week when I was in LA. That first night that I was there, I had a very aggressive attack. Ended up driving myself erratically on an LA freeway to an ER, and basically just kind of forced my way into the back, just demanding medical treatment. But so I'd met Michelle that week in 2016, and she was like, hey, I know you're Baltimore, I'm Philly, I run this room, it's once a month. Would love to have you come up and headline. We exchange numbers. Cool. We go our separate ways. A couple weeks later, she sends me a text. Hey, trying to lock you in. We settle on the date of May 3rd. So May 3rd, 2017. I come home, get my kids ready for, get through homework, all of the typical stuff, dinner. I'm just driving up to Philly, so it's not a crazy commute from Baltimore. I planned on leaving, around 6:30. Traffic was amazing. I remember the day so specific. I remember driving on 95 that day, and there was almost like no traffic, it felt like. And like I got to Philly like very easily. And I found a parking space like almost damn near right in front of the door of the venue. So I'm like feeling like crazy good. I'm thinking like, this is going to be an amazing night. All the signs are pointing to this being a great night. I get inside, see some comics who I hadn't seen in a while, meet some ones who I had never met before. It's all love. The show starts. Michelle goes up on stage, kicks the show off. And I'm kind of just sitting over in the cut. I'm kind of listening to the show halfway, but I'm also kind of talking to some people. I'm not a big drinker, but, occasionally I'll sip on something like a little vodka or a little wine here and there. As comics, a lot of times, they give out the drink tickets. So it's like, here's a drink ticket, go to the bar and get something before you go on stage. Michelle gives me a drink ticket. I go over to the bar. I get a glass of red wine. Still talking to people, barely sip it. Shows going on. I take a couple sips here and there. Then it gets towards the end of the night. Michelle says, you're going on in a couple of minutes. I give it a nod. She brings me up. I go on to stage, and literally the night up until the point that I had gotten on stage, no one was killing. It was, everybody was doing okay. Every once in a while, somebody would get a big laugh in the room, but it wasn't like that pandemonium. And I took it almost as a challenge. I was trying to, crack the room. I really wanted to. And I remember getting on stage, and within the first 20 seconds, I had people screaming, like literally people grabbing each other, they're shaking people. People are clapping, they're stomping, they're screaming. And I could just feel like it was going to be one of those amazing nights, like one of those nights when like Jordan had the flu. Like, no matter what you throw up, the shot's going in. So I remember I got a huge laugh break. And in the laugh break, I kind of sat back and I was thinking where I wanted to go next. And as I was standing there waiting, I noticed I could felt like my airways started to constrict. So sometimes when I get like, worked up, when I'm laughing really, crazy, when I'm sometimes that'll create enough of a tickle in my chest that'll kind of get that ramp going towards an asthma attack. So I'm mindful of that. I pull my inhaler out. People are, again, screaming. I'm looking at people wipe their face. I'm looking at people clap and all of this stuff. But internally, I feel like my world is like completely shutting. So it was a crazy feeling to deal with, because it was externally, it looked like, it was a moment full of joy, but internally it was like complete horror, because
what's that time frame? You're killing it. You start feeling the tickle in your chest. Is this like going on for a few minutes, or is it like it turned on a dime?
It was pretty sudden. It was one of the more, or definitely the most severe and sudden attack that I ever had. So I mean, it went as quick as I felt it. It had already kind of already gotten over the hump.
I would say in that moment, can you tell how severe it's going to be, or is there a part of you where are you trying to fight panic at the same time so that doesn't make it worse? Like how does that go?
Yeah, you hit it completely. The way you described it, it's a mixture of both. It's trying to keep the panic at bay, because sometimes is the thing that sends you into the deep end.
When Jason's done, I'm going to do like a medical breakdown of what's going on. Yeah. But I'm going to I want to hear the story, because like I'm engrossed in this.
Yeah. So I definitely, from having it my entire life and from having so many different types of attacks over the years, I can definitely feel it's an internal thing. I can tell when it's one that's like really going to be a fight, and I can compare it to, sometimes it's, I puff my inhaler like constantly. A lot of times it's out of anxiety. I always feel like I'm about to have an attack, especially after, situations like this one. It makes any little cough a possibility. It makes any tickle in my chest kind of, I'm looking at it sideways. It makes even, something as small as, environmental factors, cut grass, or when the seasons change, are all things that I need to kind of always have constantly in my mind, because they can easily kick something into gear. So yeah, that night was, I felt.
Do you know what the trigger was that night? If it was environmental?
From after it was all said and done, once I talked to the doctors and, I'd gotten back to Baltimore and they had done tests and stuff, the clearest explanation that they were able to give me is they felt as though it was sulfites from the wine.
Red wine can create basically a histamine reaction.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the sulfites per se. It's the tannins in the wood when they put it. I don't know what the process is but when they put red wine in like the casks, it gets tannins from those woods, which create a basically not an allergic reaction, but like this is why people flush when they drink red wine. It's basically giving you almost an immediate histamine reaction.
Yeah.
And if you have any sort of sensitivity to that, or if you're what medically we would describe him as being like atopic, you can definitely have a big reaction to that. And it sounds like you did.
Yeah. Wow. And at the time I knew none of this. So
yeah. So back on stage, you're in the middle of something, and do you just collapse? Do you say you can tell it's going to happen? You sit down first, like,
and that's what was crazy. It was I was trying my best. I think this is the part where you'll appreciate this part, Ryan. As a comic, when you're having one of those magical nights on stage, like you don't want to give it up for anything. So I was more upset that I had to get off stage than the fact that I was actively dying. Because it felt like it was going to be one of those nights where you like discovered something new about yourself, or found a new part of your voice comedically, or stumbled upon a new joke. So I could feel that energy, but at the same time, I knew what my body was telling me. So I remember puffing the inhaler 2 or 3 times, and I held my breath. So I'm holding it in my chest, and I kind of I point my finger to the audience, kind of make a motion to kind of like, hey, give me a second. But they're still kind of laughing at this point, so it's buying me a little bit of time.
God, what was this joke? What was your last joke? It's got them going.
They are loving it. And I remember trying to get the next thought out to begin talking, and I didn't have enough wind to even, get the words out. It's like my body made a choice. It was like, either you can try to say these things or you can continue trying to breathe. And I said goodnight. As soon as I felt that, I said goodnight, and I put the mic on the stand, and I walked out. And at this point, I'm in like full panic because I can feel that it's not responding to the medicine. It's my inhaler's not grabbing it. I typically have 2 different inhalers in my pocket. My rescue inhaler, which is this one, and then I carry a red one. It's kind of like a preventative one. It's Symbicort. So I typically have both of them in my pocket. So I'm on stage just like puffing both of these things like back and forth. And once nothing caught, I was like, the next thing was, I typically travel with a nebulizer that normally I bring inside the venue with me, but I didn't that night because it just wasn't a whole lot of like real estate as far as where to like put bags and everything. It was a bar kind of situation. Everything was kind of, and my car was so close. I figured, if I needed it, it would be there. So I tried to make it out to my car, and I remember somebody from the wait staff helping me, saying like, hey, let me help you get to your car. At this point, I was really, really fighting for the breaths. They were very, my airways were like really constricted. It was just as hard for me to push out air as it was for me to pull any in. And it was just that complete panic. There was that internal, like, there's nothing in me that I completely thought I was going to die without question. There was, even if in my mind, because I remember being on the front sidewalk of the place, I could see my car. It was maybe 15 feet from where we were, and I couldn't even get enough strength to walk towards it. My vision at that point started to kind of get a little bit blurry. I kept kneeling down. I remember hearing people's voices trying to keep me alert, like, hey, keep your head up, don't lay down. The guy from that worked inside the venue ran to my car, got my bag out. They had my nebulizer in it. At that point, things are completely fuzzy. I remember them bringing me back into the venue and trying to get the nebulizer plugged up to get that started. And at that point, I remember just hearing voices kind of like around me vaguely. I could hear people talking, but things that really kind of started to go dark. And then I remember nothing after that. So that's the point, I guess, to which in where you came into the story and other people, Ryan, because from what they tell me, I literally just keeled over head first. Head slammed into the ground. They flipped me over. I'm completely blue. Colors leaving my body. They can't get any, signs of anything going. At that point, they're trying to get into my cell phone, which is locked, and they were trying to get a hold of my wife or anybody who, could get news to my family. And then people started, other comics that were in the room started calling other comics that they knew that maybe had, DC connections. People started tweeting people. People were sending like Instagram messages.
Oh, you don't want that.
Right.
You don't want tweeting about it.
Yeah. So
Man.
people are like sending all of these messages, and finally someone got in touch with a very close friend of mine, a guy who I used to work in the school system with. I call him Grasshopper. His name is Brian Robinson. Amazing artist and painter and filmmaker here in the city. But they got a hold of him, and he drove to my house and banged on my door until my wife answered. So, but at this point, it's, I don't know, 1 something in the morning, it's late at this point.
I mean, God, that had scared the hell out of her.
Yeah. So, I mean, she's asleep. My kids are, at that point, my oldest was, when this happened, my oldest was 6, 5 turning 6. And my twins were 3 at the time. So, obviously they're in bed. She's used to me, being a stand-up comedian. I typically get home really late. So it was nothing for her to go to bed with me not being home and her to think like, oh, something's wrong with Jason. She's used to me going out to shows, and, then the next morning I tell her how the set went. And so in her mind, I think she just thought, I'm going to go to bed. Jason's in Philly, he'll be home later. And but she had no idea that, I was, on the ground of this, venue. And yeah,
you were dying.
Yeah, I didn't have a heartbeat or a pulse for over 5 minutes.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And what I was told is that, and I can't remember if you told me this later when you were in the hospital or who told me this, but someone in the audience was an ER nurse or something and just happened to have an oxygen tank in her car, which was right outside the club.
Jesus.
And ran it in to give you oxygen. So your brain didn't,
now,
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
Over 5 minutes, close to 6. Yes, there was a nurse that was in the crowd that night, like literally like one of those like touched by an angel type stories where it was like, I mean,
yeah.
For as many things that went wrong that night or perceivably went wrong, there were so many things that went right. So literally I'm on stage, and one of the audience members who was sitting there watching me go into this attack on stage, was an ER nurse at a hospital there in Philly. And she said she noticed just kind of my mannerisms and my body language. I think it was kind of giving her signs that I was in distress. As to where I guess other audience members may have thought I was just, just taking a quick puff of the inhaler.
Just jonesing.
Right. Just getting high on albuterol. Right. She said she noticed that the tightness in my chest. She said she noticed, I guess some of the flushness in my face. And she was there with her. I think they're married now, but I think at the time they were either just dating or maybe engaged. Her boy.
You stayed in touch.
Her boyfriend. We still talk occasionally. Little messages here and there.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but we follow each other on Instagram and all of that. But she said that she was sitting next to her, I think then fiance, and when I walked out of the room, kind of in that panic state, that he's the one that tapped her and was like, hey, you should go check on that guy. So it was, even with her seeing me, it was still him urging her to, proceed and follow me out beyond the showroom. So once I collapsed and I'm, on the ground and my color's leaving me, she did chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on me. And just did that nonstop until the medics came.
Was there no oxygen tank?
No oxygen tank.
Man, the game of telephone,
so
man.
Maybe, yeah. And that was the crazy thing, because the information kept changing hands. Somebody would send a text message to somebody, hey, I heard Jason passed out on stage. Then somebody else would call somebody and say Jason died, and then somebody. So it was like all of this kind of.
Well, you did. I mean, you did. That was right.
right.
You got that one right.
So it was. Yeah, it was her. She kept me viable long enough until EMT showed up, and at that point they did something. I know when I woke up in Hanneman Hospital, which is a teaching hospital in Philly. 16 hours later, in hand restraints with a breathing tube in my mouth and chest. So apparently at some point over the course of that night, they must have taken me for like a CT or some type of scan, but I woke up in the middle of it and like freaked the fuck out because I didn't know where I was.
You're probably intubated at that point too. And if they didn't have you sedated enough, you'd try to rip that tube out.
Yeah. So they sedated me, had me in the thing so I wouldn't, I guess, pull at the stuff. But the crazy thing also is they didn't have me in the hospital system labeled correct. So for whatever reason, when they took me in the ambulance and took me in, they had my belongings. They had my pants and bag and everything. Even they had my wallet, but in the system, they didn't type me in as Jason Weems. They typed me in as unknown. So that caused more confusion because once my buddy Grasshopper gets over to the house, he's banging on her door. At that point, he didn't know what to tell my wife. And, she answers the door, frantic, like, what's going on? And he's like, I think you need to call the hospital. I don't think he wanted to say anything one way or the other. He was like, you need to call, and gave her the name of the hospital. So she calls the hospital and says, I'm looking for my husband, Jason Weems. And they're like, we have no one here by that name.
Oh, no.
So, which made her freak out even more. So now it's the middle of the night. My kid's asleep. She's trying to figure out where I am, if I'm alive, what happened. She calls my parents who live about 10, 15 minutes from us. And they drive over here in the middle of the night and just sit quietly in the living room just so that when my kids wake up, someone would be there, because then my wife jumps in the car and starts hightailing it up 95. So she just starts driving towards Philly, not knowing what she's driving towards. So at this point, she's calling on her cell as she's driving, trying to get more information, trying to find out where I am, calling other hospitals. And it wasn't until she actually physically got there is when she actually found and was able to locate me. So then that entire 2-hour drive up 95, she's just like sitting in.
Oh, what a nightmare.
Whatever she assumes that has happened at this point.
Yeah. How long were you in the hospital there?
They wanted to keep me for some time. After I woke up, it was very, and what's crazy is I still don't think that I have truly processed the trauma of it all. Like even current day, a lot of times, even when I'm telling the story to people, I think I disassociate myself from it because I almost feel like as a comic, I'm used to telling a story. I'm used to painting a picture. So I think sometimes I get so used to painting the picture that I forget that the picture's about me. Like, and I was the guy. Yeah, I was in the hospital for, let me see, I woke up and I remember just being in like a daze. I remember just kind of looking around. I could see like nurses and doctors passing in the hallway, but no one still at that point had come in to say what had really happened. In my mind, at that point, nothing felt real. It was, I couldn't remember if I made the whole thing up in my head about the show the night before. If I didn't know if I had been in a car accident, I didn't know. I could see the IVs in my arm. I could tell that I was in a hospital, but the first few times when I came to, it was just me in the room. Maybe about the third or fourth time that I came to consciousness, my wife was there at that point, and she motioned to me, told me not to talk. She kind of gave me a soft version of what happened. I don't know if she knew. I think she was trying to protect. I don't know if she was trying to factor in, I guess, how I may be kind of fragile in that moment mentally. So I think she was kind of careful in how she was choosing her words. But then some doctors came in and kind of gave me, it was crazy. I remember the doctor coming in, he kind of stood at the edge of the bed and he kind of grabbed my foot and he shook my foot and he said, "Yeah, you really scared us last night." He's like, "We lost you for a good while." And when he said, because at that point I didn't know that I was actually dead, or I just thought I had passed out. No one had told me that I didn't have a heartbeat, or I didn't have a pulse. It wasn't until the doctor was standing there talking to me, and he had like some residents, some other medical students that were, I guess, doing rounds with him. So there was, maybe about 6 people kind of standing at the edge of the bed, and he's saying it. And like, it just, I still don't think that I have, or the moment has really even caught up to me fully. Because it's one of those things, I got 3 boys. I've got a crazy busy life. There was only a certain amount of time that I was able to stay in it before I had to keep moving. So it was just like, oh, I died on Wednesday, Thursday. It's I got to take the kids to school. Somebody's got to go here. This has to happen.
Who brought you back? Was it the ER nurse that happened to be at the show? Is that when you got a pulse back and started breathing again, or was it the EMTs?
The EMTs probably got him at least stable.
Right.
Okay. That nurse kept your brain
right
from melting, basically.
Absolutely. And that's something that I even still to this day, because when people, even the doctors at the hospital, when they were like, with you not having oxygen for that amount of time, the risk of brain damage and, memory loss, right, and, other types of, long lasting health issues. And I think every day I'm kind of looking at myself closely, trying to see if I notice anything differently.
I think we may have talked about this on my episode, but if you go into cardiac arrest in the field,
mm-hmm,
not in a hospital, your odds of being successfully resuscitated are less than 1%.
Wow.
So the fact that you were if your math was right, you were a 28 weeker, and survived that, and and now died at a comedy club, and were brought back to life successfully, and you now seem, I would say, normal.
I appreciate
that. No, I mean, but like you've got some crazy luck. It's not good luck, but it's interesting. Like, it is. Holy shit.
Right?
Yeah. It's almost the worst luck imaginable. But then you just snatch good luck out of the air.
Yeah.
Your description of that day, it was just too good. You just flew too close to the sun.
Too close to the sun. My wings.
You know what I'm thinking? You were without oxygen for so long. Like, maybe you don't remember it, and maybe you filled in that you were doing awesome, and no one wants to tell you.
You were actually bombing. It was a terrible show.
What if I was bombing, and that's what sent me into the asthma attack?
Yeah, no one has the heart to tell you.
Michelle Balloon's just keeping it to herself. She's like, I've wanted to tell him for 7 years. He was eating his balls that night.
He needs to change careers, but
I don't have the heart to tell him. They were booing him, and he collapsed.
Right. He thought he was doing well.
He thought, what if my kids find out I'm getting booed?
That'd be hilarious if that's what.
So let me ask you this, man, because I know it took quite a while for you to get back on stage, as I think it would anyone.
Yeah.
Now, coming out of it, was it like stand up just became such an insignificant part of your life when it went, because your family just gets elevated and your own health gets elevated? Is there that kind of thing where stand up is just like, oh, this is something I love doing, but it's sort of a cherry on top of the rest of my life? And is it kind of like an It's a Wonderful Life kind of revelation where you're like, oh man, I'm so lucky, like when you see your family and things?
1000%. It definitely, those moments always crystallize things. They always, help you prioritize things, maybe in ways that you didn't before. I was always very locked into my family. I was always very, in the present moment. I don't necessarily feel as though it's giving me a new lease on life. I feel like I already appreciated life, but it's giving me it's making me look at my life more closely in the sense of, why am I here? So with stand up, I feel the most at home on stage, when I'm on stage, than I do in most places on earth. But then the stage has always been a great place of comfort for me. It's been, outside of, the normal pre-show jitters and, just being nervous before you go on stage. Typically, once I get on stage and I'm out there and I get the first word out my mouth, then it's like gravy. It's like, oh, this is good. This is fun. Mm-hmm. I, feel like I'm my most authentic self on stage. So the stage has always been a very safe space for me. But then after that night, it became a very scary place for me, like a very scary place. It made certain laughs. Like I remember when I was on stage that night, actively going into the attack. And, as comics, you can hear everything in the room. You can hear the ladies scream in the back. You can hear the couple that's on the side. Every laugh has its own signature. You learn how to lock in on the different, textures of people's laughs. And, but I remember that night as I was actively going into the attack, I remember the sounds of different laughs going off from different parts of the room. And it's almost like that, almost like a soldier with PTSD, like hearing a loud noise and it, jarring him back into that. There's literally times, even present day, when I hear certain types of laughs, a certain tone of laugh, and it makes me remember very vividly that moment.
I don't think it's like a soldier. I think you really probably have a little bit of PTSD. No, that you were what you're describing is very much like that, and those vivid, kind of pulling you back into those moments with certain sounds or certain smells. For stuff that's a very apt description.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, stand up got really, really scary for me, and I remember what was crazy was that year, 2017. I had some traction. We're always looking for that next big thing, that next opportunity that, pushes you into the next stratosphere and I'd been submitting to some different festivals. And then I'd gotten chosen for, it was this really cool opportunity, the American Black Film Festival, which does a big event down in like Miami in the summertime, for like the last 20 plus years or so. And they bring in like, the top, Black stars, from around the world that may have movies coming out and stuff. And it's just a place where movies get, premiered and, all this red carpet situation, so on and so forth. And it's typically always been about like, acting and, movies and so on and so forth. But then they added this comedy component a few years, I think maybe back in like 2011, 2012. By the time I did it, it had, been a couple of years since they had started it. And it was this thing called Comedy Wings. And it was like a national comedy search where they did all of these showcases around the country. and they whittled it down to a certain number of comics for the semifinals, and then got passed on to the finals. And if you made it to the finals, you were a part of this showcase that was a part of this big celebrity weekend. So it's this big weekend that's taking place, and it's all of these movie stars and so on and so forth. And on a Saturday night in this huge theater, you get to go up on stage and, rock out. So May is when I died. April, I got chosen to be in the semifinals of that competition. I flew to Atlanta, had a great set. They passed me through to the semifinals, which were going to be in June in Miami. So then I go to this show in Philly in May, die, literally. That's on May 3rd. And then I was terrified to get back on stage, but I had this finals show. I was supposed to be in the finals of this American Black Film Festival thing the first week of June. And, I just had this crazy traumatic event, and I was on the fence. A part of me just wanted to cancel and just like back out of it completely and just send an email like, hey, regretfully, I can't. But a part of me was like, if I was brought back, I didn't want to squander the opportunity. I didn't want to, feel ungrateful so even though I was scared shitless and the trauma was still like very real and like hanging on me, I did the show. But when I did the show in June for the festival, that was the first time I'd been back on stage after dying. So that was May 3rd. I didn't get back on stage for like 4 weeks, and then I flew to Miami to do the finals.
Which, for people who aren't comics, that's you can build up a lot of rust in that amount of time. Whereas, like, if you're doing an hour after that layoff, you're probably going to have the best set that you've had in years because of the freshness. But in a short set, it is tough to lock in.
Absolutely.
If you haven't been on stage in 5 weeks.
Did you bring this up? Did you make a joke of it, or did you even like?
I didn't because it was a showcase. It was like it was judged by people. It was almost like being on Last Comic Standing in the sense of you got like a 6-minute set. So
it's hard to improv. I just died. Like right. Throw that one in there.
Yeah, you want to workshop that one.
Yeah.
And at that point, I don't think I had fully processed any of it. It was just, I was just trying to stay in motion. I think I was trying to distract myself. I think I was trying to, because I almost felt like, even though I came back, to me, for weeks after, I looked different to myself. Like anytime I looked in the mirror, I felt like my skin looked gray. Like I almost felt like my color didn't come back. I felt like, knowing that I wasn't here for 5 minutes, whatever it was, it left me with a very kind of like an ominous kind of feeling. So that took a while to shake.
Do you think that you'd been doing comedy for long enough that you could it was like automatic? Because I imagine that's kind of got that kind of darkness, that cloud's kind of be in the back of your head. Do you think it affected your act, or was it so automatic that you could fake it for your short sets?
Yeah, I was so locked in on, I knew the jokes that I wanted to do for that crowd that night already. So I was able to kind of lock fully into it, and not, letting my head go elsewhere.
Yeah. And there's a thing though of like, when you're talking about, like when you ask them about like, locking in and coasting, where when we're performing, when we get in that coast mode, sometimes I think we don't, in a long set, you don't really get into coast mode unless you hate the crowd.
Right.
But I never know in those scenarios. Like, I don't think the audience knows that you're coasting, but you feel it yourself.
Mhm.
And it's always like, man, I could have done better. Even if the crowd has no idea, you're like, man, if I was in it,
Right. Fully.
it's so much better. Just inflections and just the way your body moves. It's just so different.
1000%.
Yeah.
What did your wife think about you kind of getting back in the saddle?
I think she had her obvious concerns of, it was crazy. The pulmonologist who I saw following the attacks was telling me that people who have severe like respiratory, asthma attacks like this, that who have cardiac arrest because of it, that their chances of it happening again are very high.
So you have that knowledge with your kids.
Yes.
I mean, you're carrying it daily.
I still carry it. I carry my inhaler. It's like, if I don't have this near me, like I've got so many of them like stashed everywhere. I've got them in like cars, in all different bags. I've got half empty ones, brand new ones. When
we're done with this episode, I can give you some advice.
Okay. I'll gladly welcome it. Yeah. So, but she was obviously, I think, nervous just because with that knowledge, it's like, walking around with like a bomb strapped to your chest. And it's like, when's this thing going to go off? And it's like, I'm being told that it's probably going to go off again. So it's just like,
it's like, come on, miracle medicine, catch up.
So they're out there now. I mean, I don't know if we want to go into this on the show, but so like when we classify asthmatics, you're in our kind of worst category. I describe you as a severe persistent asthmatic, where you're on Symbicort, which is a long-acting albuterol-like medicine, and then a very, very strong steroid, and you're probably on like the highest dose. But there's probably more that they could do. And again, we can talk about this offline. But you're the type of patient, I have several of yous in my practice.
Okay.
And they're scary as fuck. Like, you guys go from 0 to 60 so fast.
Yeah.
And things might be like fine. You could wake up that morning and be fine. And yours was unique in the fact that it was basically not a true allergic reaction, but you had a stimulant that did that to you. Most of mine, it happens with illness or something, but I've heard stories like these with like a bee sting or someone who's allergic to peanuts and has asthma as well. And you go from 0 to 60 so fast. And those are the ones that we frequently can't turn around, even in the hospital. But the fact that you survived this going down in the field is do you play the lotto? Like, you should. Like,
I've been trying to. I do feel extremely grateful, extremely lucky, because even beyond this attack, that was May 3rd, 2017, I've had other attacks at shows since then. So 2017, the thing happens. 2018, I got approached by, it's like a serialized podcast. The woman is based out of Canada. And she does a podcast called First Day Back, where she basically chronicles different people who've had like these crazy life altering incidents, and then how they're putting their lives back together beyond, that moment. So like the first 2 seasons, one season was like a lady who had like killed her husband, but she had no recollection of it because she was like drunk or something. And then it was like, the whole redemption, like what comes after she had to like serve her time and all this stuff. So there was a season about me and this entire thing. So she, followed me around for months and, interviewed, the people who were there that night. She interviewed, the nurse who did, CPR on me. She talked to, staff members at the bar, the bartender who, watched me go blue. She talked to my wife.
That's crazy that you get this whole thing, basically a documentary done. So did you find out more about what happened to you through that?
I did.
That's
completely.
crazy.
Good. I'm glad there was this other like deep investigation, and it's not like we're just ruining your life right now. But
I don't want you to get
Making
triggered
you
tonight or
revisit.
something.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely. Hey, we'll put that in the show notes, by the way. So anybody listening, they can click on the show notes and check out that season.
Yeah, and it's amazing that she did such an amazing job with it. The way she moves the story along, the different accounts from, she talked to my parents, she talked to my wife, she talked to, my buddy Grasshopper who came and, was banging on the door that night. She talked to, all of these different people who have their own trauma from this, who have their own experience from it outside of my own. So it's like all of these different stories kind of like congregating and coming together. So I did that. That was a lot of 2018 was that podcast. And then I filmed a special at the end of 2018 called Unknown. That was based on this entire experience. And, if anybody wants to check that out, that's on Amazon, and you can see the full special on YouTube right now. And I filmed that here in my hometown of Baltimore. And, I walked through the entire thing in a comedic way, or as comedic as I could make it. As a comic, I think we're always looking for those interesting things about our lives, those things that make us unique, those things that, gives us an interesting perspective or point of view. Something that separates, you from others. And as traumatic as this experience was, the artist in me couldn't let it go to waste. It was, as much as I didn't want to talk about it or didn't want to face it or keep thinking about it or being asked about it or whatever, it was like, no, like this is a very unique thing that happened to you. Like, who else has this story? And it almost felt like blasphemous to let it go to waste. But then it came the hard part of trying to like mine the comedic gold out of it. How they say, like, comedies, tragedy plus time equals comedy. So I had the tragedy, I was trying to add some time to it, but it was hard trying to find the parts that genuinely made me laugh.
Yeah. That's why it takes a little while to do divorce material
right
after a divorce.
Right.
Because it either sounds sad or angry depending on how the divorce went until you get
it's so interesting that it's so interesting that you would say that in that manner that you did on kind of two levels. When we do our kind of psychiatric stuff, we talk about coping mechanisms and not just that maturity level of coping mechanisms. And at the top, the two highest is altruism and humor. And so you kind of combine both of those of like wanting to kind of do more with what you experience, as well as like obviously your art of comedy. And you took kind of the high road with this, and I applaud you for that.
I appreciate that.
I kind of did the same thing, right? With my almost dying of a banana deficiency, how I started spreading the gospel of bananas. And no one who has ever heard my last special will under potassium.
Right.
All right.
Ryan, you need to do a reel of that one. The look on your face of just like, God damn it, he's doing it again.
Banana story, like you're up there with, the people that like, oh man, my chopper went down is how you tell the story. And it's a good story, but it's about bananas. It's
honestly not a hero story one bit, is it?
No.
It's kind of sad because the reason my potassium was so it was at the point where it was like it could be fatal. I can't remember what No, seriously.
I know it's true. I know it happened.
Yeah.
I'm not calling bullshit. I'm just saying
the sad part is because I was a 37-year-old doing a workout for NBA players every morning at dawn. And I was underhydrating. Why was I doing that workout? It's the dumbest thing ever.
Right.
I was waking up,
hubris,
just leaving the apartment in the dark so I could go to the gym and do this crazy ass workout. And I don't know. I mean, it's like I'd done it for years, but then the thing that added the level to it was Robert Ory worked out at the same gym.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, yeah, I'll be wrapping this up as Big Shot Bob comes in.
Uh-huh.
He'll see what I do. And like that matters.
Yeah.
It's the saddest thing in the world.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you pulled through, because if you didn't, forget ridiculousness, forget Last Comic Standing, forget all of that. You're the guy that died from not having enough bananas. That's how you would be remembered. That's the only thing people would remember.
It happens. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
We don't want to take away from Jason's experience here.
Oh no!
Yeah, I didn't mean it. I was trying to illustrate how sad my version of almost being gone was, and compared to how pathetic.
No, I think it is. I think it is really cool how you spun this into. I mean, I think every comic, just from knowing Ryan, you take from your life experiences and build on it, and try to make it in your material, and to just kind of like lean into it while you're still working through it. I mean, again, I think it's the kids angle for me, having the kids and knowing that is a possibility, right? I mean, I think it's people that have predisposed to cancer or heart disease or whatever. It's any given moments in the back of your mind.
And I walk around with it daily because, like I mentioned, even beyond 2017, 2018, I filmed a special. 2019, I was still doing stand-up a fair amount. I feel like 2019, I had a bad attack at a club in DC, a place called the DC Comedy Loft, backstage with a comic, a friend of me and Ryan's, who's in LA now, Kassan Wilson. He had a show there, and me and him are sitting back in the green room. And again, we're talking, laughing about something. And literally in the time it took me to laugh and whatever, I could feel that feeling again in my chest. And I just start panicking immediately. I'm like, I stopped talking, like just complete, like mid conversation, like just, he probably was like thinking like, what the hell's going on? Like we were literally going back and forth. And then I nothing. Then I'm pumping my inhaler. I walk outside, and that attack got really bad. Thankfully it didn't, get to the point where I had to, get into an ambulance or anything, but it was a terrifying night. And I remember I finally got the attack under wraps, or enough that I was breathing somewhat comfortably. It was right before I was about to go on, or supposed to go on. And Kassan was on stage stretching. He was just trying to buy time. And he's just up there just talking shit, just he keeps checking, looking back behind the curtain like, is he good to go? Is he coming out? And I was scared as hell to go on stage. But I also didn't want to let him down. I didn't want to let the crowd down. I didn't want to, I felt the obligation to continue. I was like, I'm here. I might as well do what I came to do. And I went out and I sat down. I typically don't sit on stage a whole lot. But I, just because I had just came out of this attack, I just pulled up a chair and sat down, and I started talking to the crowd about the fact that I had just finished having an asthma attack in the green room. And
can I just say how brave it is for you to sit on the stool? Because here's the thing. Audiences, if a really big dude sits on the stool, they're like, it just looks right. It feels good.
Mm-hmm.
When a small guy sits on the stool, I think they look at us like, you motherfucker, you're supposed to be up there.
And I remember it felt uncomfortable for a number of reasons. It felt uncomfortable because I was sitting in, typically I'm more mobile on stage and moving around and physical, and, so it changed the way I was able to perform that night. And then I was so caught in the trauma and the terror of what just happened behind the curtain that I wasn't thinking about being scared about being on stage. The typical worry that comes before a show, where even to this day, I've been doing stand up for, close to 20 years. But I still get terrified before every show. It doesn't matter how big or small. I always feel like I'm going to throw up. I always feel like I'm regretting, taking the booking. It's times when I'm driving to the show and I'm like thinking about turning around, like present day. It was.
If it makes you feel better, the stress hormone when you get really like freaked out is cortisol. It's a natural steroid.
Yeah,
that might actually prevent asthma attacks.
Huh.
So doing stand-up comedy might actually be good for you.
Be helpful, right?
Yeah,
right.
I don't have any experience medically with asthma or anything like that. What I know is from 80s films, like The Goonies.
Oh, I love The Goonies.
Have you tried going on a big adventure? That seems to cure
right. I need to get like some gadgets and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just find some treasure or something. You could throw they always throw the asthma thing away.
They really do.
Yeah. Seem to work there. I don't know.
We are at
we have
73 minutes. We have
to wrap up. We have way too much shit.
Yeah.
I don't. There's nothing to cut.
Do a wrap up? Do you mean to do a wrap up? Because I want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because again, this is solid. This is a fantastic episode. There's like really not much to cut.
So Jason,
awesome.
I teach med students, and I usually make them listen to my shows just for like kind of context
to boost our numbers.
This is going to be the new one I'm going to have them listen to.
Okay.
To listen to you walk through what an asthma attack was is probably one of the most accurate things I've ever heard. For like, because I've got asthma too, not to your extent, but like in having treated patients akin to you, I want my students to hear this. That was an absolutely amazing story you told.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I feel like this was the condensed version. I feel like I could talk for a lot longer. There's so many more little intricate parts of it.
I would say I have mild to medium too, where I've had two attacks that have put me in the hospital. And so, but nothing your level.
Right.
But even the on stage part, when you talk about the sounds in the back of the room, it was more of a feeling thing, but it was the exact same type of impulse. Like I remember, like it was. So I'd just been in the hospital with the worst asthma attack of my life, and then tried to get on stage, but I had this sensitivity, for months, where anytime I felt like any sort of weirdness in my chest, I thought that attack was coming back.
1000%.
And so then my first time back on stage was this show called Set List, which doesn't exist anymore. It was this Paul Provenza show where you just say hello and then you turn around and it's a random string of words. It could be like cucumber hot dog or Myrtle Beach, Japan or something. And you have to have a joke for it. You just make something up on the spot. It's like 4 or 5 things. And I'd done it a few times, but on this night, it was my first night back from this. As soon as I got on stage, I felt that it was just anxiety, which I don't normally get anxiety from shows, but this one's, it's sort of high pressure because you're making it up off of something you see behind you.
Sure.
And I got just a hint of what I felt like in that asthma attack, and it brought me back into the attack.
Yeah.
And I just got off stage immediately because I was like, I can tell, I told him, I'm so sorry. I just had this bad asthma attack. And I think if I keep going, it's going to happen again, even though for me, it was just anxiety at this point, but it was such a thing. And I just can't imagine like having the level of attack that you did or attacks that you've had, like, to be able to fight through that on stage is really something.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And they keep coming. I just had one I had one about 6.
These motherfuckers keep coming.
I had one about 6 months ago downstairs in the house where I'm at right now, while my kids were in school. They were in school, and I had a crazy one here where I passed out and woke up in the hospital again. My wife had to call an ambulance. All I remember was the paramedics coming up the steps, and then it went dark again.
All right, Jason, thank you for reminding everyone to not take your lungs for granted, among other things in your life. And before we get out of here, I also just want to say to check out Jason's stand-up because it's truly excellent. There are different types of stand-up, right? And a lot of people who kill are kind of crowd pleasers. And when comics say crowd pleaser, they don't mean that in a good way. They mean that like they're giving the crowd what they want.
Right.
But then there's another level of comic who shows the crowd what they want, basically, and is unique and just does what they want. And then the crowd realizes, oh, that's much better than what we thought we wanted. And Jason's one of those people. And so I think,
thank you, brother.
You all should look up any stand-up you can find from Jason Weems. Watch it and enjoy it. I promise you'll love it.
That means the world to me. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, we'll put in the show notes if you want to listen to a polished professional podcast that's not this one. You can check out First Day Back season 3.
I'm gonna link it.
Yeah, and also we'll link the it looks like WPGC 95.5. They stream as well, so we'll link your morning show there as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you,
Jason. Thank you so much. This has been really good.
Well, Ryan, anything you want to promote that's in the docket this week for Stafford County Courts?
Nope. Hope I don't see any of you.
Eric, any patients or exams you want to promote?
Get your flu shot, get your COVID shot. It's that time of year. But if you've got a baby, get the RSV vaccine, Beyfortus. It's fantastic.
Adrian couldn't be here for this episode. He is actually in Ukraine with his wife.
Wow.
During a very stressful time over there, but he's not here for a good reason. But you can check out his stuff on Wrathbearing Tree.
And for me, RyanConnorComedy.com, you can get my book and link to my special Live from DC, as well as previous albums and other stand-up appearances. And thank you so much for listening to Baggage. This has been a really great episode. And we can't thank Jason Weems enough for joining us.
Thank y'all for having me.
Don't forget to look into everything he does. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Awesome.
That was great.
Thank y'all.
Music for Baggage provided by Quincy Ledbetter. You can find his stuff at qledbetter.com. Graphics provided by Megan Weaver. You can find her at meganweaverart.com. Special thanks to our premium members for their support. You can become a premium member by clicking subscribe in your Apple Podcast app or by visiting thebaggagepodcast.com/support to sign up or to gift a membership to someone. A percentage of all proceeds go to charity. If you have any questions, comments, or a good story to share, please email us at thebaggagepodcast@gmail.com.